What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Deliberation Room. My name is Hanson, and today we're talking more about Ground Branch. We're going to be talking about the settings that I use in Ground Branch that feel comfortable to me, both from controls and also graphics settings. Now, when we get into the graphics that I use, I do want you guys to be aware of the system I run. That way you kind of see where I'm starting from. That way you know if you need to go down or up. But for my CPU, I'm running an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X. And for my GPU, I have an EVGA 3080. Now my RAM, I've only got 16 gigs in there right now, but that's just because a couple of my sticks decided to sabotage my computer. Long story, I've only got 16 gigs right now. That's the hardware that I have right now on my computer. That's what's letting me run this. I'm able to record or stream and still get about 100 frames per second, 100 to 120 around that range with the settings I'm going to show you guys today. So keep that in mind when we jump into this. If you do have any questions about the setup that I have or setup that you're trying to set up for yourself, please drop them down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll be answering those as I can. Alright, so once we get into the lobby here, we're going to press the escape key and go up in the top right. That's where your settings button is going to be. We're going to hit that, and we're going to skip controls for now because that's going to get a little more involved. We'll speak about that in a second, but let's jump down to gameplay. There's one or two things to change here. Alright, so this first section here in weapons, we have default fire mode, default off-target position, and after grenade though. I'm not changing anything here. I'm keeping it at low ready. I prefer semi-auto if you're a burst guy or a full auto, and that's what you run typically. You might want to change that, but for me, I'm keeping it semi-auto. For default reticle brightness, I keep at maximum. Some of the maps you do need to turn it down a little bit, but majority of maps you want it at maximum because of the light settings. Right here, this section here, I do like the red dot being first, but I've had issues where this is the default for me, but if I change it and come back to it later, it'll reset. But I like red dot first because I need to worry about things around me before I worry about far out. So when I first load into a mission, I want to make sure my red dot is the first thing to pop up. All right, so free look, I'm not changing anything. Dead zone, I'm not changing anything. I did change a little bit. I think it starts off as 1 for the default, but this is going to be dependent on your monitor and setup. But I'll show you what I did. So when you pull up your night vision, you want the far edges of your night vision to barely kind of touch the edge of your screen, to get just barely past it, if that makes any sense. If not, ask questions in the comments, I'll clarify. But 0.85 is where my sweet spot was found to be. This next section here, miscellaneous, the only thing I did change here was the skip press any screen button at the beginning, where it shows like the entire keyboard and your mouse, and it usually says press button to skip. For me now, it just skips that screen because I know my keybinds now. I don't need to see them at the beginning of every time I turn on the game. So I set that to yes in order to skip past that screen. Everything on the right here, as far as the HUD, I haven't changed anything. There are crazy in-depth changes you can do, like changing the color of the interaction ring, changing the grenade impact color, things like that. But I'm not changing any of that. I kind of like the way they have it set by default, so none of that's changed for me. But let's go ahead and jump down to video. As here in the video tab, a lot of this is going to change depending on the setup you have, so keep that in mind. Your system may run this, may run better than this, may run a little bit less than this, and need some of this stuff tweaked. So keep that in mind. A copy and paste might not work for this section for your computer, but let's go into it anyway. So resolution, you need to make sure it's 1920 1080. When I first pulled up the game, it was doing 720, which no, that's not it. So make sure it is 1920 by 1080. Windowed full screen, that way I can alt tab out of the game and I can handle my streaming service, my Spotify, things like that. If you're in the game and you're staying in the game, I would go full screen. That's going to give you the best FPS. But if you're alt tabbing out of your programs a lot, then I would recommend windowed full screen. VSync, I'm keeping off. Gamma, I have it 2.2. I don't remember if that's a default. I believe it is, but 2.2. Super resolution and reflex, they're okay. They haven't done a ton to give me better FPS or make the game look better, so I'm not really messing with those. I'm keeping them off. Make sure your resolution quality is at 100, whatever resolution you have here. Now if you start to suffer from really low frames, then you might need to bring it down, but play around with it, see what works for you. For me, I've got it at 100. So in these, there's typically going to be 4 settings. You have low, medium, high, and epic. I have most of mine at epic or high, which is the max on some of them. But do keep in mind that, like I said, if you start to get the low FPS, or your computer's struggling a little bit, just bump these down. And this is a big one to bump down first if you're suffering those issues, is view distance quality. What it's going to do is if you've got trees way out in the distance, it's going to reduce their quality in order to reduce the strain on your system. So this is one that's should be bumped down first if you're suffering some issues, as well as maybe bring this down to 90, 96, 97, 95. Bump it around there. I wouldn't go much. If you're starting to get like down in here, then I'd consider changing this or switching to full screen. I would try other things. I wouldn't bump like way down if I were you. So for my anti-aliasing, I do have TAA temporal set, and that's because I have my screen space reflections too high. It has a note here as to if you have those on, have it set to temporal. Once again, another thing you can play with, but for me, because I have these two on and this one high, I'm going temporal on this one. Everything else, I'm not going to break down super in depth. Everything is as full as I can get it. So once again, this is very involved. Play with it. Find that sweet spot for your system. All right, for my field of view, I have set to 95. I feel that's the most realistic that I could get. And for my eye bias, I have set to 100%. Show FPS, I do have turned on, but if I was going to do some more gameplay where I'm trying to make it as realistic as possible, if I was doing like a recording or something, I might turn that off just to make sure I don't have to edit that out later. And unlimited frame rate, I have set to true because I'd rather just max that thing out, see what I can do. Once you do get it set up though, it could be made that you set it to false and then set it to just below your max, because steady frames is better than bouncing around super high frames. So figure out what works for you. That's probably something I'm going to do later, is actually set that to just below what my max typically is, so I have a steady frame rate. All right, moving down here to audio. We have channels. Make sure this is set to binaural if you're using headsets. If you're, for some god-awful reason, playing on a sound bar, you would want to set it to one of these, but it was set to stereo 2.0 when I first downloaded the game, so make sure you set it to binaural, because that's what's going to give you directionality. When you hear a shot, you'll know that it was left and up, or forward and up, down. So binaural is going to give you that ability to determine location of shots and sounds. Also, make sure that the dynamic range is set to full, because that's going to make gunshots, explosions significantly louder than all of the sounds. Recommended for an immersive experience with headphones. So do make sure you're running full. Master volume 100, music 100. SFX, I haven't really changed anything here. And because my buddy used Discord to communicate, which you likely do as well, I haven't changed anything here. So yeah, do what you need to do for that. But for me, playing on Discord, I'm not changing any of that. All right, so getting in here to controls. This is going to be the more in-depth part of the video. It's going to be a little more involved. So make sure you're following along. Once again, if you got any questions, make sure you throw them down in the comments. I'd be more than happy to answer. I do play on keyboard and mouse. There is minimal controller support for the game at this point. But if I were you, I'd play keyboard and mouse for this game because of the precision, turning, and movements you're going to have to do. Keyboard's going to be your friend. So left, right, up, down. Looking around, I'm not changing any of that. Obviously, it's a keyboard. It's what every game does. Free look, I do have set to tab. So what free look is it allows you to look around yourself in a game without moving your weapon. So I can keep aimed on this guy, press tab, and actually look over my shoulders, look up, look down, do what I need to do, and still have my rifle set on that guy. So if he moves or I have something popping off, I can send rounds down there. So it's a really cool feature. I have it set to tab. I can't remember what it was set to as default. I do remember changing it, I believe. But it is a pretty neat feature that's not in some other games. All right, so with free look set to tab, move forward WSAD, I'm not changing any of that. This is a big one for me, the lean left and lean right. A lot of games make it Q and E, and that makes sense, left, right of your movement, that makes sense. But the problem with it is when I'm coming up on this corner here, and I need to press E to turn, I now have to somehow move my pointer finger down to also press D so I can pie that corner. It doesn't make sense. So what I've got it set to is some of my mouse buttons, lean left and lean right. That way my WSAD is totally free of my lean, so I can really be precise when I pie corners without having to fumble my way through, because you see my laser is actually set to E. Actually having to fumble my way through. So I know a lot of games do Q and E. It might be a habit that you have that's hard to break, but I do recommend trying it out. Try out having it on a mouse button. It does eliminate your mouse buttons there, but it is well worth it in my opinion. And I've done it so much now, it's just second nature. So give it a try. All right, so for my crouch, I have set to C. Run is left shift. Steady aim ADS, I haven't changed any of that. Interact is F. Pretty simple stuff. In the shooting section, I have everything as it was default, but the only thing I believe I did end up changing was the fire mode selector I have set to X. I believe it was C to begin with, but I set C to crouch just because I'm familiar with that from other games. That was hard to break for me. So fire mode selector I do have set to X. In the inventory section, I have not changed anything. I've kept all of that stock as it is. All right, so the next section here, weapon attachments. So attachment wheel is the center mouse button. I don't believe I changed that from what it was stock. I don't believe so. Tac light IR illuminator, pretty controversial. I use caps lock. I just like how, once again, I have the freedom to depress that button and move around. So a lot of people set that to like their mouse buttons, but because that's my lean, yeah, so can't do that. But I like how it gives me the ability for light discipline to hold it, to have a temporary on, and then double tap it to have it on. So yeah, for me, I like having it as caps lock. That way I can use my pinky and use my other fingers to walk around. So it's something I do. Moving just into that, laser E. Laser's one that I don't really care about that level of discipline. You know, like there is light discipline, but there's not as much laser discipline, right? And I'm not using this version much. If anything, I'm using the IR version. So I have this set to that because if I'm ever using it, I'm going to put it on permanent on. So I do have that set to E. And obviously, you still have the temporary option to single press, but I have that set to E. For toggling the laser mode, I have it set to middle mouse click for IR and visible. For scope zoom in, alt and scroll, I didn't change that, and home and end for the brightness up and down, which I haven't changed from the default. Communication, me and my friend are using Discord, so this isn't something that I've changed at all. Admin panel, ready room, I haven't changed. And we're never going to forfeit, so there is no keybind for forfeiting. Let's see, spectator mode, I'm not changing anything there. And it gives you the, like when you go into spectate, it gives you what all the buttons are for spectating, so it doesn't matter what that is. Over here on input options, this is going to be something, again, very specific to you, your system, what kind of playstyle you're used to. For aim type, I don't like toggle. I think that's disgusting, so I have that set to hold. Default reload retention, that means that the default reload when you press R is going to retain that magazine that you just took out and put in your fresh one. No retention means you're just dropping that magazine. So the tactical reloads or the retention reload is the one that we're typically going to want to do. So I have that set to retention. And I don't understand why this is an option to change this, because in the game, get over to the range here, if I fire several rounds and I need to do a tactical reload, I just press once and that'll retain that magazine. But if I go ahead and fire through an entire magazine and I double click R, he's actually going to toss that magazine. So I don't understand why that's an option to have a default. I understand it would switch the single tap versus double tap of the R, but if you know to single tap on a tactical, double tap on a combat reload, then it doesn't make sense to have a default. So do what you want with that. Mouse sensitivity, I've kind of narrowed down. I know this looks really specific, but I was just kind of playing around with the scroll until I found a part that felt good. But I have 23.9. 24 would probably feel just as good for me. It's just, it feels good. It's kind of what I'm used to here. So that's what works for me. Free look sensitivity scale, I'm not changing. And the thumbstick stuff I don't really care about because I'm not playing controller. Sensitivity scaling I'm not messing with. I do have mouse smoothing on. I do feel the game feels a little bit better with it on. Always run, I have set to no. Run type hold, lean type hold, and crouch type toggle. I did forget to go over the advanced settings for the game, so I'll go ahead and let y'all see those. When you click in the controls section on the right side at the bottom, you'll see an advanced section. I'm not changing anything here. That doesn't bother me, but if we go over to the video tab and click on the advanced up here on the right, you'll see a ton of stuff about changing the bloom quality, SSGI quality, things like that. this isn't something you're really going to mess with unless you're working on like thumbnails and stuff and you're really trying to get a good realistic looking image. So I wouldn't recommend messing with any of this stuff. The game looks pretty good the way it is, but play at your own risk. If you'd like to mess with some stuff, by all means. So that's going to be the end of my settings, guys. I hope you appreciate the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, took something away from it. If you did, go ahead and drop a like on the video. Go ahead and subscribe as well if you're feeling inclined to, because I think you found your home here if you enjoy these type of games. We'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe, stay happy. Peace out.